But we start with two major new developments concerning the Bush administration's torture program. As reported tonight by the Washington Post, in July 2002, the Pentagon's top lawyer, William Haines, was informed by the military's best authorities on the subject in writing that the enhanced interrogation program that was being developed in Washington was, in fact, a torture program, and that torture was not an effective tool to gather reliable intelligence. The Joint Personnel Recovery Agency, which oversees the SERE program, the How to Survive Torture program, from which the torture techniques were reverse engineered, they sent a memo to William Haines, General Counsel of the Department of Defense, which bluntly called those enhanced interrogation techniques torture. The memo warned that history refuted any assumption that an interrogator could get reliable or accurate information by using torture. For reasons yet to be determined, these warnings were ignored, and the program was signed, sealed, and implemented anyway. A serious bombshell and a story ever more crowded with bombshells this week. The second major development concerns the National Archives and Vice President Cheney. The National Archives has just released details of documents requested by the former vice president, which appear to show the grounds on which Mr. Cheney intends to defend himself from investigation or even prosecution for torture. Mr. Cheney was, of course, known throughout his tenure as vice president for his secrecy, for his reluctance to speak to the media, for his proud disdain for public opinion, and for his resistance to disclosure of government information to the public. It was thus a leap very far out of character when this week he announced on Fox News Channel that he was seeking the disclosure of classified information about prisoner interrogations.
And there are reports that show specifically what we gained as a result of this activity. They have not been declassified. I formally asked that they be declassified now. I haven't announced this up till now. I haven't talked about it. But I know specifically of reports that I read, that I saw, that lay out what we learned through the interrogation process and what the consequences were for the country.
Reporter Greg Sargent today obtained from the National Archives the actual request filed by Dick Cheney for those documents. The documents, you see the request, just the actual request here. The documents he is requesting are still classified, but here's what Cheney's request tells us. Cheney is trying to get two documents. One is from July 2004, and one of them is from the following June. They're both CIA reports, and both, he helpfully notes, can be found in a file from his immediate office labeled detainees. Imagine being at a meeting with Dick Cheney about something, and you notice on his desk he's been flipping through his detainees file. The first document that Dick Cheney is asking for is from July 13th, 2004. Now, we don't know for sure what it is. It's redacted, right? It's still classified. But here's a big fat hint as to what that document is. In the torture memos that were just released, why, here's a citation for something that's from that exact same date, July 13th, 2004. It's a memo called Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, preeminent source on Al-Qaeda. Now, we don't know if that is the exact same document that Cheney's requesting. Maybe he's requesting some other CIA document produced on exactly that date about exactly that subject. I would bet a poke in the gut that that is what Cheney is requesting from the National Archives. Cheney said this week that what he wants declassified are reports that show what we gained as a result of these, now we know, torturous interrogations. But now we also know that he's not asking for evidence, for documentation that was produced at the time that people were being tortured. What he's asked for are reports produced after the fact. Actually, if you look at a calendar, what he's asking for is something that was produced right after the Abu Ghraib scandal broke and shocked the nation and the world, and right after the Inspector General of the CIA produced a report on CIA interrogations that has been described by people who have seen it as sickening. What he's asking for is documentation produced by the CIA at the time it was trying to cover its proverbial butt. Please excuse the phrase. What seems evident from this new development is that Cheney's this request from Cheney's apparent request for the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed told us a lot memo. What seems apparent is that Vice President Cheney will try to defend himself using the same defense that was used in the torture memos. The same defense that was rescinded even by the Bush administration. The same defense that has everyone trying to figure out if the lawyers who constructed that defense are going to get convicted or just disbarred. Vice President Cheney is setting up as his defense the argument that it's not torture if it worked, using the legal concept that behavior must shock the conscience to be illegal under U.S. law. The former vice president appears to be basing his defense, like the ill-fated OLC lawyers did, on us not being shocked by torture because torture works so well, because it's so efficient. Joining us now is retired Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He was Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell from 2002 to 2005. Colonel Wilkerson, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Vice President Cheney has emerged as the Bush administration's chief defender thus far on the issue of torture, as all of these recent documents have broken. He is now seeking to declassify evidence that he says will show how well it works in getting people to talk. Does that seem like a cogent defense to you? Does that make sense to you that he'd be arguing that?
It does not. It seems illogical. Vice President Cheney is a man who frightens easily. All you have to do is go back to his 5 deferments during the Vietnam conflict, his behavior post 9/11, undisclosed locations and so forth, and the imminent and the politics of fear that pervaded the first Bush administration and a lot of the second Bush administration, almost the equal of what Joseph McCarthy managed to achieve during the latter part of the Truman administration and the early part of the Eisenhower administration. He's a man who lives on fear, and he's a fearful man. And I think this, as you hinted, is his effort, because he's fearful right now of what might happen to him and some of his subordinates. He's trying to lay out some sort of defense, but the defense doesn't hold water in my view.
There's also this late-breaking news after close of business today. It's from the Washington Post that the SERE school experts, the people who ran the How to Survive Torture training course for our troops, this course that was reverse engineered to come up with these techniques, they told the Pentagon in writing in 2002 that what was being devised in Washington was a torture policy and that it wouldn't produce reliable and accurate information. That memo seems to have been ignored. What's your reaction to that?
I don't doubt that. Professional opinion from the CIA, from contractors who interrogated, from the military's interrogator, from the interrogators, from the FBI interrogators, everyone with whom I've spoken who had at least 10 years of experience or more is of that same opinion. And I can't imagine that a professional organization in the Pentagon wouldn't give the same advice. And I think that's pretty good advice. Interrogators will tell you that on occasion you may get reliable information. But the general trend is you don't get reliable information. As you pointed out, you get someone trying to stop the pain. And you also compromise your ability to come back to that individual subsequently and get reliable information. So you've just ruined him as a subject for potential future. This was an administration that not only didn't tolerate dissent, it worked ways in the system, in the decision-making system, that dissent could be shuttled aside so that their single opinion could be carried out in terms of execution. It's, for an academic like me who studies national security decision-making since World War II, it's a unique situation. It has no parallel in our history.
And we know something now about the political consequences of that. It seems like what's changed is that it may also have legal consequences. If the defense is going to be from officials that this program was set up, sure, but they were relying on the best legal advice that they had no way of knowing that it was illegal, and yet it turns out that there's a ton of evidence that they were told it was illegal and they just ignored that evidence, it would seem to me that it's going to be difficult to mount a legal defense in case there are prosecutions here. Do you think that there ought to be prosecutions?
I'm of mixed opinion there. I do think that there are 6 or 7, maybe even 8 lawyers, David Addington, John Yoo, Jay Bybee, Alberto Gonzalez, you can name them, who ought to be disbarred, and they ought to be disbarred permanently. As far as going after leaders like Richard Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and everything, I just don't think there's the political will, and if there is, I don't think there's the political skill to do it. I think that's very sad commentary for me to make about my democratic republic, but I do think that's the case, and so I wonder if there's enough energy in the Oval Office to handle a financial and economic crisis, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, and all the other challenges that we confront right now, and do this. I have deep concerns about that.
I'm with you on political skill, the question about whether or not it can be handled well. It seems like the political will may follow the public will, and if the polling data recently is anything to go by, the public is sort of all about seeking investigations at least, if not prosecutions in this case.
And that's what our country's all about. If that's the case, then let's do it.
Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, former Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell, it is always great to have you on the show. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rachel.